free breakfast. Please go and help yourself. The cakes are not being... Oh, there they are. Someone's getting the cake, so that's good. Really happy this morning to introduce Simon Young from, and he'll, if I've got this wrong, hopefully, Lithmodos VR. A short disclaimer, Simon and I actually went to school together. And so he's, for those who know the Adelaide Hills, he's a Meadows boy made good, who's now stepping into the world of VR. So we're really happy to have you with us, Simon, and I hope you can hear me, and I hope you're actually there virtually. And I'll just look at the next slide from Tracy. Okay, before we get started, I'd just like to acknowledge the country. I'd like to acknowledge this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and we pay our respects to elders both past and present. So thank you very much all for coming. There's a few more people. Okay, everybody, we welcome Simon Young from Lithmodos VR. Thank you, Simon. Take it away, mate, when you're ready.
No worries. No worries. Am I coming through loud and clear?
You're coming through really nicely. Thanks, mate.
Oh, good. Okay, excellent. For you. Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to speak today, Stuart. It's a pleasure to see so many friendly Adelaide faces in the room. So I, as Stuart mentioned, am from Adelaide originally, and I actually did my undergraduate degree at the University of Adelaide in archaeology. And then I moved to that larger eastern suburb of Adelaide, Melbourne, to complete my master's and PhD there. It took a little while, but I got there. I submitted my PhD in September last year. And the subject of my PhD was the evolution of Greek and Roman cities in Asia Minor, which is modern Turkey, and the effect of these cityscapes on contemporary observers. So I was very interested in how cities evolved over time, and also a visual perspective of the cities from basically the street level. So in order to get a better understanding of that collective effect, I started experimenting with 3D modeling software programs to try and produce essentially what were 2D printouts for plates for my thesis. And then a couple of years ago, as many of you may know, the Oculus Rift company emerged with its developer kit, and I suddenly realized that, hey, these models I'm creating could very easily be imported into virtual reality. And basically, that's what I did. I got hold of a development kit too, and put my models into a game engine and pressed go, put on the headset, and hey presto, there I was standing in one of my models. And I thought, wow, this is pretty cool, actually. So I showed some friends and colleagues, and they all got very excited. And while I was in Ankara in Turkey for 6 months, and also in Austria for 6 months, I showed my colleagues there, and they also got very excited and invited me to give public lectures on the subject. And finally, around June last year, I showed the demo to a business incubator called Marketplace Ventures here in Melbourne, and he got so excited that he incubated the business. And so about 6 weeks ago now, after many hours of developing the concept of on-site virtual reality into a product, we launched a productized version of the experience and managed to attract $900,000 of private investment. I've just come back from a 2-month tour of Europe, showcasing the experience to, I'll see if I can get this right, to Spain, Italy, Sicily, which is part of Italy, Malta, Israel, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, France, the UK, Portugal. I think that's all of them, and showing the concept to both museum directors and fellow archaeologists, but also to members of the tourism industry, to promote the use of virtual reality in archaeology on site as an aid to visualize. So what emerged from this is Lithmodos VR, and so essentially what we do is we are a virtual reality content production and distribution studio, and specializing in the ancient Greek and Roman world. And many of you might say, well, that's pretty niche. Why don't you do a virtual reality version of all of history? And some other virtual reality studios are attempting to do that, to do a virtual reality version of history. But with Greek and Roman civilization alone, there are 7,700 ancient sites in Europe. So I think we've got our work cut out for us over the next lifetime. So I have a short video that gives you a brief introduction of our workflow. So I think, Tracy, you're going to hit play in the conference room. And for those of you who have dialed in, there is a link, on web link 1 it is, that you can press play on as well and follow along at home. So I'll just give you a moment to watch that. I hope everybody's had a chance to get through that very brief explanation of how to create virtual reality environments for the ancient world. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about virtual reality in general. When the concept of immersive virtual reality, or VR, first gathered pace in the early 1980s, many, including myself, were captivated by the seemingly limitless possibilities for this technology to transform our lives. I remember when a 2000 SU appeared at downtown on Hindley Street. For many of you who might remember this place, it's a video arcade, in 1991. I was sure that this was the beginning of a new era, and the price tag for this device was $65,000 US. So the release of Lawnmower Man in 1992 tells the story of a mentally disabled gardener and how his mind was expanded by an immersive VR environment. This further confirmed my certitude that VR would soon be everywhere, and suddenly it wasn't. The hype faded along with the dream. The root cause, I believe, was that the devices that had been developed were A, prohibitively expensive, B, incredibly bulky and heavy, and that the digital environments that had been created, well, were a long way from, air quotes, reality. Yet, in the background, enthusiasts kept the dream alive. Non-immersive virtual reality technologies began to appear on the web, such as QuickTime VR. Who remembers that? With this technology, one could pan around a 3D space on a website with a mouse. Developments like this showed that the definition of what virtual reality was had opened up to a wider interpretation. However, even though this particular 3D immersive, well, 3D pan around image of the Jerusalem Gate is photorealistic, you could hardly call this immersive. Since that conference in the late 90s, things have really sped up. New technologies are now emerging that seem to have finally overcome those three hurdles of the 1990s: the price of the equipment, its wearability, and the realism of digital technology. Digital environments. At a conference held in Barcelona in 1998, part of a series named The Computer Applications and Quantitative Methods in Archaeology, the theme was virtual reality in archaeology. The conveners raised a number of key issues on the subject of VR, and the conference showcased the extraordinarily wide range of 3D visualization and virtual reality technologies that were in development. What does it mean to say something is virtually real, and what effect does enhanced realism have on the way that our visualizations are received, were some of the questions that were posed, which still really resonate today. The term virtual reality can mean different things to different people. In fact, it's come to mean anything from a paper printout of an AutoCAD drawing on a board or on a site, a 3D fly-through of a video of a scene reconstruction on a screen, a laser or photogrammetry 3D scan of an object or place and its manipulation on a screen, an experience on a computer screen that you can use your mouse to click on, links to show new scenes and objects or to pan around. How many of you have come across the term virtual museum and got really excited to click, and only to click on the website to see one of those early, late 1990s blue links that lead you to a JPEG that slowly downloads of a old piece of ceramic, hardly virtual. Virtual reality can also mean a cinema experience on a standard screen, an immersive experience using a head-mounted display or HMD. And if we talk about immersive experiences, these can mean a 2D or 3D video on a head-mounted device, real or rendered, a 2D or 3D still photo, real or rendered, a 2D or 3D environment that you can interact with and move around, or an augmented reality experience where a digital reconstruction is superimposed on reality. In fact, one of the biggest challenges I face when I communicate with potential partners and clients is that when I say that we are a virtual reality archaeology content production studio, many of these people may think that virtual could be any of the definitions I mentioned earlier. They may be thinking, oh, okay, he does 3D fly-throughs of an ancient city, or he takes pictures of ceramics and puts them on the website. So I really feel that the term virtual has become meaningless and really needs to be defined a bit more tightly. So what's out there in terms of hardware for those of you who want to embark on the journey of virtual reality? Well, probably the most popular piece of equipment these days is the Samsung Gear. It's a lightweight, wearable, head-mounted device that tracks movement, first released in 2014. It's the result of a partnership with Oculus and Samsung. Then we have the PlayStation VR, which was released quite recently. It was codenamed Project Morpheus, and this now ships with the latest PlayStation console. Augmented reality devices like the HoloLens are in development phase, and this enhanced reality device imposes, as I mentioned, a 3D image on a user's field of vision. Although I have to say that a couple of weeks ago, months ago now, I tried a HoloLens at a tech fair, and the experience was less than impressive. The moment you look out the window into direct sunlight, it disappears. The image does. In 2014, Google announced Google Cardboard, a very cheap way to create a VR headset with a mobile phone. And recently, HTC released the Steam VR, which is a high-end tethered device. So all of these devices enable a viewer to engage with a virtual reality head-mounted experience. So with these devices, we're really looking at the first hurdle being overcome, the price of the devices. So Samsung Gear you can pick up for around $50 from Officeworks, as long as you have a Samsung phone. It's a lot less than the $65,000 price tag for the 2000 SU that appeared in downtown Hindley Street in the 90s. So For those of you who are keen on developing content for virtuality, what's out there for the punter, the average punter? The first attempts to create 3D environments stemmed from computer applications that assisted in architectural planning and design, and many of you will remember that AutoCAD was the leader for, and in many ways still is the commercial leader, and that was released in 1982. And since then, a range of other 3D computer applications have appeared, such as 3D Studio Max, Maya, competitor to 3D Studio Max, and Google SketchUp in 2000. So commercial software developers, like those behind Google SketchUp, quickly realized that user-generated content could be employed to build up an online database. The result is that today we have access to vast repositories of models, both open source and commercial. Many of which are architectural and many are objects. And all of this is thanks to the countless hours of work put in by modeling enthusiasts. Now, when we create a virtuality environment, we can access these objects. One of the most, and I'm just going to skip forward a little bit here, one of the most important of these online repositories is the Trimble Warehouse, launched in 2006. It has 2 million freely downloadable models. Another is Thingiverse, with over 100,000 models, and Turbo Squid, which is another commercial website repository that boasts 370,000 models, but for sale. One great thing about the world today is the open source computer application development movement. So on the left of the slide here, these come up a little bit early, I apologize. The most popular application for creating models for yourself, which is free, is Blender. Blender is freely downloadable from blender.org. Any content that you create on Blender remains yours. It's really a great all-round application. Another open source application that's attracting a lot of attention at the moment and continuously improving is Make Human, where you can create a pre-rigged, anatomically correct human being for the population of your scenes or for gaming characters. I'd like to show you a short video. So if we go onto video 2, let's go forward here. There we go. That showcases the possibilities of the open source application Blender for use in architectural simulations. All objects and environments in this video were entirely created on this platform. We've come a long way from our first efforts in creating 3D environments in the 1990s. You'll notice the different elements that are required to achieve this level of realism. Good quality textures need to be sourced or created and painted onto solid mesh objects. These textures are accordingly set to reflect or absorb artificial rays of light that are bounced from the surfaces. Correct tones of light and shadow are also key to a successful environment. Although these examples are of modern architecture, you will appreciate the results and level of realism that could be achieved for digital reconstructions of ancient architecture and cityscapes. I should stress, though, that the processing power needed for this resolution of rendering is, to my knowledge, currently only applicable to fixed animations or fly-throughs. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Okay. So I'll briefly now just talk about the history of Lithmodos and where we fit into this ecosystem of virtuality content production. So in June 2016, as I mentioned before, the company was founded, and by the end of the first quarter of 2016, we had already started to create scenes. And in fact, you can check out one of our scenes right now on your desktop, or if you happen to have a Google Cardboard handy and a mobile phone, at the link lithodomosvr.com/get-the-app. You'll see that in the web link 3 window. So if you whip out your phone and or you're on your computer, and if you click on that link, it will take you through to a demo of the Odeon of Agrippa in the Athenian Agora in the at the end of the first century BC. So this is an application of again another open source programming language, WebVR, and this attempts to is aiming at integrating web browsers on mobile devices and on desktops and tablets to make virtual reality environments and augmented reality models very easy to load. So you can pan around on this image with your mouse, and if you put the cursor onto one of those navigation globes, it'll actually transport you around the building, and you can explore it. If you have an iPad or tablet, you can lift up your tablet and you can move your tablet around, and it becomes an augmented reality model. And if you have a phone, you'll see at the bottom right-hand corner a goggles symbol. So if you press that, if you're on your phone, you can then put that into your Google Cardboard device. So I'll let you have a bit of a play with that. So since we successfully raised our first round of funding in January 2017, that's allowed us really to grow our team. Our staff now includes freelance 3D artists who have expertise in creating photorealistic scenes, a chief technology officer who is working very hard to develop deployment of the 3D content for all devices, and a full-time recently graduated PhD in archaeology who is constantly researching and putting together content for our next scenes, as well as a salesperson and marketing personnel. While I was traveling around Europe, spreading VR to the world, I demonstrated the technology on site in the exact location of the reconstruction. So just to clarify, if you have your head-mounted device and you pop it on in a geo-referenced location, the virtual reality stereoscopic image matches precisely to the ruins that surround you. So if you are looking at, for example, the ruins of the Temple of Venus in Rome, and then you put on your goggles, you are standing in the Temple of Venus in Rome. If you turn around and look around in your immersive environment, and then you take off the goggles, you'll see that it actually matches completely the ruins that you are standing in. So this is a way of immediately transmitting archaeological research to people on site in a way that I think is superior to the on-site information boards that you see on ancient sites these days, or a guidebook, or even a tour guide. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, especially from young people, millennials, who spend, as we know, a lot of time interacting with technology. So this is really a way of bringing the ancient world to life through a medium that the young and the older can appreciate. I was able to also to present at ITB Berlin, which is the world's largest tourism fair, and again the reaction was extremely encouraging from tourism operators as a way of showcasing the cultural heritage of their tourist destination. In terms of education, in January this year, before I went on my trip, I was invited to give a guest lecture at the University of Melbourne to teach virtual reality in archaeology to students. And this was a great way of allowing students to immerse themselves in an interpretative reconstruction of an ancient site, and it was very positively received and sparked very lively discussions about the use of the usefulness of the technology, and also the delight that students who can't necessarily afford to go to ancient ruins to study them firsthand can be transported to them in the classroom. So one of the big challenges that face virtual reality content production studios these days is how to commercialize or productize the content. And we've been working very hard on this in terms of how are we going to deploy all because essentially the content, virtual reality content, is the same, whether it's viewed in a cardboard, whether it's viewed in a tethered experience, whether it's viewed on a Samsung Gear or higher end device, and it's very fair to say that tourism operators, universities, and site directors and archaeologists, not so much archaeologists because they're not commercially driven, see the value in it. But of course, we're still in a very nascent moment of going over some of the pricing options that we've come up with in terms of commercializing the content, and this structure has been very well received by universities, tourism operators, and museums, etc. So, moving on to the potential revenue streams of virtual reality. One of our goals as a content producer is to create a library of VR experiences which could be licensed and revenue shared by the company or client that assists in producing it. In fact, the implementation costs are less than the revenue derived from a single enrollment, which is important for universities. And many of you are probably aware that the education landscape is shifting immensely, and a lot of focus is landing on concepts like digital humanities and immersive education, and virtual reality really fits neatly into this niche as a learning experience for the future, and offers a great opportunity for early adopters to cultivate a cutting-edge reputation as a technologically advanced institution. So it's still very early days, but for example here in Melbourne, the University of Melbourne recently opened its Digital Humanities Studio. It spent millions and millions of dollars on this incredible building with workshop, with collaborative spaces and cinemas and workbenches, and so really this seems to be a trend. Okay, and just to finish off, virtual reality I think has a limitless potential to enhance teaching, especially for us of the ancient world. It takes students' focus away from the traditional textbook and academic article, which still very much have their place. But in one class period with virtual reality, students can be transported from one ancient site to another, from one archaeological period to another, with the click of a button, or with gazing at the right navigation globe. So, but really, I firmly believe that we, rather than get carried away with the possibilities of this and try to create a virtual reality version of all of history, it's really important for reconstructions and for content to draw on those on the background of years and lifetimes often of research and first-hand knowledge, and that they reflect best academic practices. It's really important to ensure that the end product is both as accurate as possible and also informative for the viewer. And the great thing is that all this research exists. All the site plans are published and sitting on library shelves and ready to be brought back to life or to be revitalized by technology such as virtual reality. Lithmodos' mission essentially is to bring the ancient world back to life for everybody. And I think on that note, I will hand over the discussion. Well, so say thank you for your attention.
Thanks very much, Simon. Everyone was just clapping. I'm not sure if you would have heard that. Wasn't
I could see the clapping. I couldn't hear it.
Okay, you could see the clapping. That's good. Yeah. Well, believe me, everyone was clapping, and we really enjoyed that presentation. You walked us through it really well. It's really exciting. A lot of the stuff you're showing there, and despite the need for processing power, some of the imagery was just stunning. So I can see tourism operators lining up to give you their money. Well, I hope they will be anyway. But what we want to talk about is higher education and the applications for various things. So while we're, someone's saying I'm really quiet. Sorry, Anthony, I'll speak a bit later. Before we take some questions in the room, I just wanted to know, do you know of any other applications in using your technology or virtual reality effectively in university setting? Well,
I think part of your question broke up there, but I think you were asking whether there are other educational institutions employing virtual reality in their teaching practices.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
Yeah. So I've heard that the University of Adelaide has recently installed a virtual reality lab at the library, and we've had some inquiries from the States about providing content for their newly installed virtual reality libraries as well. So it really is the beginning of the proliferation of virtual reality within universities, but people have described 2017 as the year of the hardware, sorry, 2016 as the year of hardware, and that 2017 will be the year of content. So it's the old chicken before the egg question that all these companies like Oculus, which was acquired by Facebook, and HTC, Steam, have spent millions and millions of dollars producing this incredible hardware, but really there's nothing much to see on it. Kind of like when the internet was first launched and it was difficult to find the recipe for a chocolate cake. So universities are embracing the technology slowly, but I think there's a real demand for content there before it can be used effectively. And also there's questions, especially like at La Trobe University here in Melbourne. One of their issues is how do we maintain the equipment? Do we lend it to students? Do we get the students to bring their own smartphones? Do we invest all this money in high-end equipment that's going to be superseded anyway in the next few years? So there's a lot going on.
Yeah, I mean we have a few sets of Google Cardboard which are amazingly cheap and give you They do give you weird marks on your face, but they do. It does give you an amazing experience. So are there any questions in the room? Anyone got any questions for Simon? No. Okay, we have one over here. Thank you. I'll just pass the microphone over.
Hi, Simon. You showed us some images of students in Melbourne using their headsets to look at stuff.
Correct.
So is this just used in a demonstrative setting where you walk into a classroom and say, hey, look at how cool this is, or is this somehow tied into some sort of assessment or teaching or some sort of pedagogical framework within which this solves a particular purpose that they couldn't have done otherwise?
That's a great question. Yeah. So this session that we taught in January was the first of its kind at Melbourne University, and we were very careful to make sure that the Google Cardboard experience was embedded within a session about the applications of virtual reality to archaeology. You might recall from the brief presentation that the use of virtual reality in archaeology has been going on for many decades. So there's a lot of prior scholarship for students to engage with and to critically evaluate. And as part of that session as well, there was a brief training session on how students could use Blender to create their own virtual reality environments and how virtual reality can be used to better understand not only ancient sites but also site plans by extruding foundations to explore environments in a 3D space with virtual reality. So, yeah, the Google Cardboards were at the end of the session, and in a very directed, controlled experience where they were presented with the Odeon of Agrippa 3D reconstruction, but they'd also done reading from the academic articles and publications about that building, and they were asked to critically evaluate the reconstruction of the building and to ask whether or not this type of technology is useful. And really, for archaeology, virtual reality reconstructions are just an extension of a pre-existing discipline of reconstructing ancient sites. You will have seen those 3D line drawings or AutoCAD drawings. So really, it's the next phase. So I hope that answers the question.
Simon, my name is Jenny Stokes.
Hi Jenny.
Hi. And I, like many people at UniSA, are just at the point of starting to think of how to apply this in our own teaching.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I got a teaching grant for some 360-degree cameras,
Right.
headsets, and Samsung Galaxies.
Yep.
And I was just wondering, in terms of novice students going in to create product for this, have you had any students who have been generating work?
Yeah. Once again, it's very early days. I can say that from the session in January that maybe 10% of the cohort showed intense interest in the content creation part side of it, and very, very quickly mocked up incredible looking models without much prior exposure to the software. So watch this space. I think as students become more aware of the potential of open source content creation platforms, we'll see a lot more of that. While I was traveling around Europe, I saw a lot of graduate researchers, for sure, who are creating very high quality archaeological virtual reality content, and some undergraduates showing interest. But yeah, I think we'll see more of it.
Thanks, Simon.
Right.
There's a couple of questions in the chat window there. The question from Anthony, I think, is the one that you just answered.
Yep.
There's one from Quinn.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you can see this or not.
Yep, I can. Yep.
Is it actually universities similarly adopting to technological change at a much slower pace than industry? So by the time content catches up with VR, don't you think the innovation post will have already shifted?
Yeah, and this is a real Thanks for the question, Quinn. It's a real challenge, and it really reflects a growing tension between educational institutions and industry. As we all know, the tech industry is moving very, very quickly, and universities, museums, governments and cultural heritage organisations struggle to keep up because I believe that as universities are grant focused, the time that it takes to put together a proposal, to send the proposal to a committee who then decides whether or not it's a good use of resources, and then the answer comes back, and then it's all carefully planned out. That process can take 6 to 12 months sometimes, and by that time, the technology in question is obsolete, and this is kind of like symptomatic of. But at the same time, universities are under a lot of pressure to become more commercially minded, to develop business models, to be run more like businesses. So Quinn, I think you're absolutely right. It's an ongoing tension and challenge for universities to overcome, and something that really they need to address. That technology exists, and we all know it inherently. Technology exists on a life cycle that everybody, most people anyway, recycle their mobile phones, every 12 to 18 months. And that old kind of thinking that, okay, we think of one project, we invest the money in this equipment, and that's it, end of story. That's okay for the next 20 years. It's not a reflection of how technology the technology industry is evolving. It's on a life cycle. So I think universities should put aside, a few $1 million each year as a constant, to update and to keep up with that technology cycle. Does that answer the question, Quinn?
I think so.
Yep, thanks.
I think so. Quinn's smiling, so I think yes.
Oh, good.
Still thinking about the few million that you just mentioned, I think. So, and we all are actually. That would be very nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, okay, we have one last question. Thank you.
Hi Simon, this is David.
Hi David.
I just wonder, what's the long-term effect of using the VR, the side effect? Because I personally have a VR set, and after 20 minutes, I feel dizzy. I know it's not a long-term effect on your body, but being an old person I am, just wondering the health side effect you associate with it. Is there? I know constantly there's research being going on, and we're not sure what's the impact on the human health or the human mentality behavior itself.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Thank you. So the early iterations of virtual reality technology was heavily criticized because it was making people feel sick using it, and this was due to a number of factors, such as a low frame rate. Now the recommendation is that all VR should be at least 60 frames per second and above. The second reason is that when you move around in virtual reality, it's especially in realistic environments, if there are any sudden movements or jolts, it can actually produce a sensation of motion sickness. Virtual reality content developers are now extremely conscious of those two factors, and so you'll see in a lot of VR experiences a comfort rating, ranging from very comfortable to exciting. And in fact, and there are studies that show that younger people have more tolerance for this motion sickness effect than older people. I'm not sure we know why. But also on all virtual reality headsets and devices, there's generally a warning that advises children under 13 not to use VR, and the reason they give is that children are undergoing below that age a critical period of visual development. Now, I'm not really sure whether that's true. I haven't seen any scientific studies to back that up. I kind of think that it might be an insurance policy. rather, let's not let kids use it until we know what it does for sure. But apart from those particular effects on health, I'm not aware of any kind of eye strain or damage to the eyes for people over 13. And even those for those under 13, I don't think there's any studies to support it.
Hey, thanks very much, Simon.
No worries.
I'd just like to thank you very much on behalf of the TIU and myself for taking the time to speak this. We all really enjoyed it, and that was a great presentation. So
thank you.
Thank you very much, and for everybody online in the room, we'll see you in a few weeks for the next breakfast session. Okay, thanks very much.
Pleasure.
Big round of applause coming your way.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye.